So just as a background to ISDM, it actually goes back to the time some of us were working in the social sector. I've been in the sector now for about 14 years. And what we saw is that there were amazing people, amazing individuals, amazing organizations doing great work in the country, in all corners of the country. Matlab, I used to work in Barmet to Uttarkashi to Dhamtari to, the south. And everywhere one would see this. But all of them would struggle to build organizations, managing money, managing people, managing process, managing network, managing compliance, managing governance. And it was very sad to see those organizations collapsing. And thereby the impact of that work would never reach, more people, which means over time or a wider section of people, i.e. scaling the impact. And that was really the starting point for looking at, what is the, sort of problem? Why is that problem and how do you solve it? The first realization I had, because my own background is an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad and all that, is that the MBA way of working cannot work in the social sector. There is a problem today. We have MBAs coming into the sector, and as long as they're willing to understand and learn about the sector, they can be very effective. But several people who come in assuming you can run a social sector organization the way you run a bank or the way you run an IT company is a huge mistake, and that is dangerous for the sector. And that's why we set up ISDM, because the sector has very different reasons to exist. The conditions under which you operate are very different. The stakeholders are very different. So you cannot run it like a business. A business has its own way of running, which is based on certain shareholders, certain customers, which is a very different idea versus a idea of a flourishing society. How do we work towards a society where nobody is being left behind? Requires a very different style of management. And that's why we set up ISDM. And when we set up ISDM, and we say that ISDM was set up by the sector for the sector, because we must have spoken to 1,000 people in the sector. What does it take to, be good at development management, to become a management professional in the social sector? And that's where we started the journey of building ISDM. And today ISDM, it's been 8 years. So in that sense, there is already a track record. And we are almost imagining ourselves, you can call it like an IIM, one of the earlier IIMs for the social sector. Obviously, IIM still did a very basic job of bringing management from the Western world. We are actually building a whole new management from the grounds up. So it's a very unique institution in the sense of building the theory and practice for a new type of management for the social sector. And it's been received extremely well because we built it by involving people in the sector. Like I said, we must have spoken to 1,000 people. It took a year to build the curriculum. And after 3 years, we also edited or changed the curriculum based on feedback from students and from people where our students went to work. And there is no surprise that, our students have always had 100% placement on campus. They've always had the highest average salary across any social sector jobs in the country. So all that's been very good because obviously it's involving the sector. It has been made for the sector, and it's got the experiences of, people who've already gone out and worked from our organization. The good news for people like you is there are 7 batches of people who are already there and working in the sector, who are there to receive you and welcome you. The first few batches didn't have that advantage. They had to work, go in and explain, tum kya ho, what do you do, kahan se aaye ho, kyo chahiye tumhare jaise log, and all that sort of stuff. Today, of course, it's different. And today there is obviously an ecosystem of, CEOs who have hired our organized students who've gone out and are now working in the sector. They've all gone on to senior jobs. So abhi to mahol bahut hi alag hai. So that's really the background to why ISDM was set up. But when we set up, we also realized, and this is a question many students ask, is we said we will do what we believe is important for the sector. So hum kahin se copy paste nahi karenge. So we have actually built this whole curriculum grounds up, and I'll talk a little bit about the curriculum in a minute. We stayed out of UGC and AICTE intentionally. We followed the ISB model. I don't know if you know the Indian School of Business. In the MBA world, the Indian School of Business commands the highest fees in the world of MBAs, some 47 lakhs per annum or something like that. But the reason it commands that is, one, it's a 1-year program. 2, because it's built by the industry. So, the Reliance, the Godreges, the Tatas, they were all involved in building. So it was built by the industry for the industry. And thereby the recruitments are very good and the salaries are very good. I don't know if you know this, ISB does not offer a degree or a diploma. They offer a certificate because that's what you can do. That's the way the country's rules are. If you want to offer a degree, you have to offer a 2-year program. If you want to offer a diploma, you have to offer a 1-year program, but you have to also follow other conditions. I'll give you examples of the conditions. All professors have to be PhDs. Now we realize that we want a lot of practitioners to come and teach our course. Now in a standard format, you will not be allowed to do that. The UGC says that 90% of your classes should be taught in the classroom. Whereas in our case, almost 25-30% is based on field and projects and immersion work and all that, because we believe that's important. And the third is, our whole evaluation and assessment processes are very different. We've created a lot of new ways of working because we believe that's important for the social sector. So I'll take another 5-10 minutes to talk to you about the program and how it's designed so that you'll get an idea of why we have designed it that way. So the first thing we said was, we sat down and said, what does it take to become a development management professional in the sector? And that's the question we asked. I said thousands of people when we met, but then eventually we got together. And we realized that there is knowledge, there is skills, and there is also attitude. Very rarely do any courses focus on attitude and outlook and perspectives. A lot of programs will teach you theory. Textbooks se kuch padhayenge, ya, they'll even give you some practical skills, but very rarely work on the person itself. Whereas the one thing we realize of the social sector is you need all three to be an effective management professional in the social sector. So the kind of things that we do in our program, I'll just give you a sense of the structure, and I'm sure you'll get into a lot of detail, but more to explain the idea is that first you have to understand context. And this is where the starting difference is from an MBA program. Because if you don't understand society and the complex nature of society, you will never understand why social problems exist. Whether it is caste, whether it is poverty, whether it is gender, whether it is disability, whether it is, livelihoods, whatever it is, forests, tribals, unless you understand society, you can never, ever understand societal problems and ever be able to work on the societal problem. In the corporate world, I don't need to get into so much of detail. I need to understand product category users, then I will do research, I can find out my answers, and then I'll do my business. Whereas social sector society is very complex. You have to almost understand philosophical reasons of what is a good society, psychological reasons of why people think in a certain way and behave with each other in a certain way, historical reasons of what has culture, what has religion, what has caste, what has normatives done to women, individuals, etc. in the country. So the first part is understanding the context. So we start with that understanding of context. Only if you understand the context, then you will understand the social problems. And then you can understand how to work on those social problems because it is connected to an understanding of society. So then we bring in obviously ideas like systems thinking, design thinking, etc. to understand, okay, if I have to work on school education, where do I start? Do I work on teachers? Do I work on textbooks? Do I work on classrooms? Do I work on parents? Do I work on examination system? Where do I even start? So you need to sort of, figure out how do you grapple with a complex system like that. So we talk about systems thinking, design thinking, and all that to design interventions. It's very difficult to design interventions if you've done an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad income, like I was. And that's what I'm saying from my personal experience. And then the third part is having designed your intervention, how do you create an organization? This is the part the social sector has missed out on. Because if you don't know how to create an organization, how do you bring people? How do you bring money? How do you bring processes? How do you understand the complex nature of teams and working together? You'll never be able to build organization. That's what, in masters in public policy, and that is for the state, and masters in business administration, that's for the business. That part is understood. The first two parts are very, very rarely, if ever, understood. So it's these three parts come together. We say context to mission, mission to organization, organization to impact. That's really what we talk about in the program, but that's just the knowledge and skills part. And then I was telling you about the attitude part. There's a whole thing that runs throughout the year. And this is probably one of the most important things we do in our program. It's called PMDL, which means Personal Mastery for Development Leadership. That's why we start understanding your own lived experiences. Because each one of you, right, Varundika is very different from Dildar, is very different from Dhyaneshwar. And what are your biases and how do you bring those biases into a decision-making process? The same situation, each of you three will make a different decision in a social context because of your lived realities. One of you understands caste, one of you understands gender, one of you understands poverty. And unless you understand those things, it's very, very different. And each one will come from those biases. So when you're making a decision in social sector, you have to understand those biases, which means you have to understand yourself. You have to understand your blind spots. So we start with that whole idea of understanding you first. The second is you and your relationship with others. And the third is you and your relationship with society. And these are very critical and these are very value-based ideas, so we call it universal human value. I don't want to teach the PGP course now, but those are the important parts of that program. And that's what completes the whole program. And then, of course, we have things like writing in the discipline. How do you write for the social sector? It's very different from how you write corporate letters. And it's very important to understand that because corporate is very definitive. Corporate is very like bossy almost the way I would write. Here you have to be far more inclusive. You have to be far more, recognize the participative nature of the kind of work that we do. And the fact that we can't, the problems will keep evolving, right? Social sector problems are always wicked problems. As you're solving the problem will, keep getting complex. How do you deal with that? So that's what, the program structure itself is about, which, like I said, covers knowledge, skills, and attitude, perspectives, whatever you want to call it. And what we have found is that students go out of the course, and if you talk to our alum, and I know many of you get referred by our alums because they all believe in our program, our ratings have always been very, very high by the students and our alums. But they will always tell you, I mean, not only that I got a lot of benefit out of ISDM in terms of whether I became a management professional, whether I got a job in the sector, whether I created a circle of strength for myself, they'll always say that it was transformative. Because rarely in our education system do we touch on some of these issues. And that's what makes our program really unique. And I think it's very critical because you can't be in the social sector without understanding those things. You could create very dangerous decisions and actions if you don't realize your own biases when you go out to do the work. And that's what makes it really, and that's why a lot of students tell us that, it was transformative because I got to understand myself. I mean, that in itself was worth the 1 year at ISDM. Forget the fact that you also learn management, forget the fact that you also know how to design interventions, forget the fact that you build a circle of strength with your students and others. The second thing that we found very, very powerful is what we call a relationship-based education. You will hear about a concept called bricolier, because our belief is that each of you is on a different starting point. Praneeth is starting from where, Pratibha is starting from somewhere else, Shubham is starting from somewhere else. So we look at your journeys from each of your starting points and your aspirations. We have a concept of a bricolier. So we have a bricolier for 1 in every 20 students who's working with each of you to figure out what your journey is. In most higher education, once you get into the classroom, all of you are the same. I don't care whether you're a girl, whether you're a boy, whether you're a postgrad, whether you're married, whether you're whatever. I will just treat all of you as the same. And then I deliver the course. And that's how higher education is. We call our system relationship-based education, where we try to at least make that attempt of seeing the individual journeys of the classroom. Recognizing that each of the individual backgrounds is a different background, and thereby how you look at the course and the curriculum is very, very unique and very different, right? So those are the kind of things that we will be sort of looking at. And that's very, very powerful. The third thing that we find is the diversity. We're very fortunate that every year now we're finishing the 6th batch. Every year we've had students from at least 20 states. And so what we've done is we have actually leveraged that in the whole curricular process itself. And one thing you'll hear me say if you join the institution is that you learn the most from people who are least like you. And thereby, when you have a diverse cohort, what a Tamilian Brahmin from Tamil Nadu will learn from a Christian pork eater from Nagaland and from a Muslim from Gachibowli is very, very different. And thereby you learn a lot from that diversity. And we make sure that happens because we realize it's not just about 60 students or 70 students or 120 students just coming into a class. It's about understanding each one's value and contribution. And that makes a completely very different experience for each student. And there are several such innovations as far as higher education itself is concerned in terms of what we do. Like I said, we've always had very high placement rates and the highest average salaries, and we wondered why is it so. And my own view is that the reason there is so much of regard for our students is one is it's very relevant. They come day one, they know, about the sector. They, as I mean, the English phrase you use is they hit the road running. That's the first reason. The second is in many ways, I think besides the fact that it's relevant, is the fact that we involve the sector in a very, very big way. So, the number of CEOs who come to either address the students or teach is actually unbelievable. In fact, and we're very fortunate to get some really, really amazing people who are in the sector to come and talk and, share their experiences and all that. And I'm sure if you see our social media posts or even our website, you'll see the kind of people that come. So we have among the best faculty that you can imagine, because we use what's a visiting faculty model, because if you have to teach behavior change, we look for the best person to teach that. And that's an ISB model that we've adopted in what we do. So we find that because of the fact that the sector is very involved, the course is very relevant, the faculty that teaches are really of the top order. And now increasingly, because our alumni are already there in organizations, we believe maybe the reasons why, our students are so sort of well received in the sector.